This is your Barbados Today morning news update for Monday, October the 15th. I'm Emmanuel Joseph. Thanks for joining us. Topping the news at this hour, help is coming within the next few weeks for pensioners who have been disadvantaged by government's debt exchange initiative. The announcement was made by Prime Minister Mayor Mortley in an address to the nation last evening. The Prime Minister said government was simply waiting for the domestic debt exchange exercise to close in order to be in a better position to meet the specific needs of the pensioners.
I am happy to say that having received the support and the positive vote of all of our banks, our insurance companies, and 99% of our pensioners who voted, that we are now in a position to address their peculiar needs within the next few weeks. And I will provide the specifics on those as soon as we can, because we understand the nervousness that many still have. Having said that, they have all voted to give their country, our country, a chance, and to be able to ensure that their children and their grandchildren can see their way forward by giving Barbados that platform to start fresh.
Prime Minister Mortley also said the government's intervention in rescuing the stranded students of the Washington University of Barbados Medical School was to avoid a humanitarian crisis. The students were left without food, water, electricity, shelter, and money following the arrest and charge of their Chief Executive Officer Rao Venkata Gopi on fraud charges.
Of Washington University of Barbados, which has left us, with me, with a bill to being able to ensure that we do not have a humanitarian crisis on our hands, because these children who have been left out to sea, and I call them children because in many instances they're 18, 19, and 20, young people who are thousands of miles away from their home, have at least to be treated as like the human beings that they are, and to ensure that they are given access to shelter and to food and to the basic necessities of life while we sort out what is to happen with them, whether to be transferred to existing schools nationally or whether to return home to their countries depending on their indicative preferences.
Purging corruption in public office along with making the guilty accountable for their actions is currently being worked on by the government, according to Attorney General Dale Marshall, who shared last evening's address with the Prime Minister. Marshall said painstaking internal investigations are ongoing as he continually uncovers evidence of rampant corruption, which he said has caused the country to lose many millions of dollars in investments during the past 10 years.
Prime Minister, the work continues. In some instances it may take us months, in others it may take us years, but we want to assure the people of Barbados that we are absolutely committed to purging ourselves from the stain of corruption as we go forward. There are a number of pieces of legislation which we'll be introducing, and some of these will involve such things as unexplained wealth. It will also involve giving the courts powers to be able to look at how people have acquired various assets and so on. It's not just enough for us to hold people in public life to a high standard through our integrity and public life legislation. All of Barbados has to be willing to subject themselves to the discipline and to the rigors of conducting our affairs in a way that we can be proud of.
In other news now, Minister of Home Affairs Edmund Hingston is calling on employers to give ex-prisoners a second chance to avoid them returning to jail. Hingston told a religious service to mark Prison Service Month at the Breath of Life Seventh-day Adventist Church yesterday that if employers were to hire former inmates, it would reduce the high rate of recidivism.
Prospective employers need to give former skilled inmates a chance to be gainfully employed. This is an issue in Barbados, of course, especially as it relates to the need to produce a certificate of character for about 85 to 90% of the jobs in Barbados. Relatives ought to provide them with a warm and supportive home environment. The wider society needs to be more forgiving and compassionate. To all I say, give ex-inmates a second chance. Give them a chance to successfully reintegrate into our society. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do this, I'm confident that the high rate of recidivism will be significantly reduced.
Hinkson said the introduction of curfews and electronic ankle monitors are coming for minor offenders as an alternative to imprisonment. Turning his attention to prison officers, he advised them to treat inmates who are in their care in a humane manner.
This is also an opportune moment for you to reflect on those persons in your charge and to adopt a humane approach to them with a view to preparing them for life after their release from doors. You need to encourage them, as your mission statement emphasizes, to lead law-abiding and useful lives, both while in custody and after their release.
The Lester Vaughan Memorial Secondary School, which was closed last week due to environmental problems, will remain shut this week. The Ministry of Education says it's to allow for the necessary environmental remediation to take place at the school.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
We're back with news from the region now. The creation of jobs, the saving of lives, and a reduction in murders are just some of the benefits which advocates say are in store should marijuana be legalized in Trinidad and Tobago. Yesterday, supporters took to the streets with chants of legalize it as they staged a national cannabis rally in Woodford Square.
Upon entering Woodford Square on Sunday, there was an unmistakable odor in the air. And the message was loud and clear.
We are rallying for the legalization of marijuana.
The National Cannabis Rally featured a number of speakers advocating for the decriminalization of marijuana. Criminologist Darius Figuera took the podium with a suggestion he feels would address the crime problem in TNT.
If you want to lower the rate by which people are willing to wipe out a family to get a half pound of compress, legalize it, let people grow it and smoke it.
One politician present to hear the message was the MSJ's leader, David Abdullah, who was originally part of the rally's organizing committee. The MSJ sees the issue as a priority area for legal reform.
We also have to make sure that we don't see a set of new coffee shops selling marijuana where you could go and smoke, owned by a few, the elites, and then you have ordinary people who have used it for generations becoming consumers and marginalized.
And on the international scene, the United Nations is warning that 13 million people in Yemen are facing starvation. It's calling on the military coalition led by Saudi Arabia to halt airstrikes which are killing civilians and contributing to what the UN says could become the worst famine in the world in 100 years. The BBC's international correspondent Orla Gurin, producer Nicola Karim, and cameraman Lee Durant sent this report from Sana'a, which contains some distressing scenes.
Well, this is where you can really see the tragedy of Yemen. There's ward after ward here of severely malnourished children. Nowhere in the world are more people at risk of starvation. I was here in Sana'a 2 years ago, and it's really shocking to come back and see how much worse things are now. Rotib is 2.5 years old, a victim of Yemen's growing hunger. In the bed across the way, doctors show us another 2-year-old called Bassem. It's hard to look. His grandmother, Nadia, shares his torment. She's malnourished herself. Bassem was born into the poorest nation in the Arab world, but war has pushed Yemen to the brink, and now the currency has collapsed. Food prices have doubled in a month.
And that's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We are also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as Screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. Now you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM. I'm Emmanuel Joseph. Have a fantastic day.